Good morning, Misfits. You are tuning into a special edition podcast. We are talking about Phase 3. It has been 7 weeks. Phase 2 is coming to an end, and we are going to take a deep dive into what is going on with Phase 3. We got a few questions from you guys, some specific stuff to answer, and as usual, we will go through strength and conditioning and bitch work and skill and accessory and all that good stuff and let you guys know what is up. Before we get to that, this episode of the podcast is brought to you by Pure Spectrum. Head to purespectrumcbd.com and use the code word Misfit. We are recording this podcast. Would it be in the future or the past? I'm not sure. We're recording this podcast in the future past, and we're about to head to Wodapalooza, and I know that I will be relying heavily.
We will be in Miami when this is live.
Wow.
When this goes live.
I'm currently relying heavily on Pure Spectrum CBD to make sure that I have lower anxiety and lower chance of getting sick, and I actually sleep while we're in Miami. There's a pretty good chance you goons are going to be snoring your ass off in the room.
I don't snore.
Yeah, that's true.
That's the reason why.
So again, I digress. PureSpectrumCBD.com. Use the code word Misfit. Save yourself some money. We're also brought to you by Sharpen the Axe. Head to sharpentheaxeco.com and use the code word. You know what I'm going to do? Use the code word Phase 3 PHASE number 3, not spelled out, but the actual number 3, and save yourself 15% off. We always do 10% off. We're going to do 15% off to celebrate Phase 3. Also, just a reminder, the Misfit Musings, we got a little weekly blog post every week that you can either find on the website, or if you are signed up for any of the tiers, including the free one, you will receive that via email. Just me talking to you guys about things that I, find interesting, within coaching and training and everyday life, and trying to mix all that stuff together and, just stay connected with you guys. Hunter, teammisfit.com. What's up?
Yeah. Well, first, obviously, hopefully, if you guys are listening to this, you're familiar with Misfit Athletics, but
that makes sense.
Yes, good. Now we're cleared that up. You get the Misfit Musings. Those are obviously for the free tier. You get the Misfit Wad and stuff like that, but the start of a new phase is always a good time to kind of test out the program, see if it's right for you, whether it's the MFT, Hatchet, age group version. But you've talked about it a little bit. You get a subscriber email. There are lots of additional perks to subscribing to actually one of the paid tiers. In addition to the most well-rounded program, there's a lot of training pieces. Like, you guys get, in my opinion, a lot of value as far as the programming itself, but when you tie all that stuff together with the podcast, whether it's the Phase 3 stuff, the Unprepared, the free Misfit Musings, the subscriber email, it all ties in really well together. So if you're thinking about it, the beginning of the phase is always a great time to start with that. Similarly, if your affiliate is looking for programming, always a good time to jump on that in the beginning of the phase. Sign up anytime on teammisfit.com or through SugarWad for the affiliate programming. The competitor program follows a similar structure to what we're going to talk about here today. The GPP program is that true GPP variance, so it does not follow the same structure that we're going to talk about today, but still written by the same guys who bring you the world-renowned, most well-rounded program.
Boom.
So, yeah. Visit us in Miami, too. We'll have a booth.
But they'll be seeing this and we'll already be there.
Yes.
And Wodapalooza
so if you're listening, you'll be listening
over.
to that now. Visit us right now. As you're listening,
just walk
to this,
around South Beach is a good chance. We are either shipping gear out or eating tacos.
At least one of those two.
Yeah, one of those things will be happening if you're looking for us. All right, Phase 3.
Chill.
Let's talk about Phase 3. So the last time I just kept saying over and over, we're trying to tell you a story. I don't mind doing it again because it's been 7 weeks. We're connecting the dots here. We started with Phase 1. We did some very meaningful work. We've just gotten through Phase 2. And although, the thing that keeps popping into my head, the catchphrase that could end up being like a sharpen the axe or, any of the other stuff, the dead men tell no tales, is this idea of always ready, never finished. And that can flip upside down and be never finished, always ready as well. We need to always be ready, but we need to also keep that mindset of like, we're going to continue to work and we're going to continue to work. And there's really no sort of end in sight. And that's on purpose. So with that in mind, I am the boss and I get to pick the fun stuff. So I get to talk about strength and accessory work. And these guys have to talk about conditioning. We have very specific things going on within each of them, but obviously the variance gets higher and higher in the topics that you guys have to talk about. So you guys are going to have to figure out how to talk about that once I'm done talking about the stuff that's really easy to talk about. So we spent a ton of time cleaning up the clean, pun intended. Nintendo.
Pun intended.
Pun Nintendo.
Pun intended.
We spent a ton of time cleaning up the clean. We'll leave it at that. So now we're going to peak the clean. We are going to, I mean, you guys have seen it. Are you scared? Like, are you going to have to do any of it? I'm not.
I'm going to jump in occasionally to affiliate class when it's the nice day. I don't know. I've seen some of the other progressions.
Talking about the clean and jerk work?
That's where I was going. Yeah.
So I don't know if it's worse or easier than the timed clean and jerks that were in phase 2. Because
it's different. It's different. So one thing that is great about programming strength for a decade is you sort of understand what it takes to peak a certain lift versus to want to have it for high rep versus wanting to have it for, maybe touch and go, whatever it is. The clean is very simple in theory and extremely challenging in actually executing as the athlete out on the floor. We know that the stimulus within the clean needs to have a heavier barbell.
Absolutely.
Less variables. The snatch itself, we can go a little bit lighter. We can go more reps because it's very skill based, especially when you're comparing yourself to another CrossFitter. When it comes to the clean, less variables, heavy weights. So that's what we're going to be after. So you're going to have 1 day a week. You're going to start every week off every Monday with some heavy cleans. High percentage, lower rep. You're going to move through those. Then later in the week, you are going to have what a CrossFitter would probably still consider low rep, but not so low rep squat clean and split jerk, like the full on. And, because the split jerk itself needs a little bit of that skill mixed in, and because we're already cleaning earlier in the week, we're going to be doing stuff like sets of 4 of clean and jerk at moderate to high percentages. So it's a thing.
And we're going to jerk every rep.
Correct.
That question's going to come up. Do I only jerk the last rep?
Yeah,
sure.
It's clean and jerk. Every single rep is clean and jerk.
If you hate your fitness.
If you hate your fitness. I'm not even sure what you mean. I'm not even sure what you mean by that. So again, simple in theory. We know that it works. Obviously, still have that technique focus, still think about the things that we just went through in phase 2 when you're transitioning into phase 3 when it comes to the actual clean work. But we're going to have to put some weight on the barbell to make that adaptation. And that's certainly what we're asking for. If you are unable to follow the percentages, it's usually pretty simple. Within the clean, you're probably looking at knocking off about 5% for the most part. Knock 5% off, make sure you're moving properly, and you will get a new 1 rep max because you improved on the skill a little bit more than just that like strength adaptation.
Also doesn't hurt to use some of the positional stuff that we did in phase 2 as a warm up.
Absolutely.
For this phase. We didn't mandate it or program it in here like we did with phase 2, but like if you're just going to ditch everything that you learned in phase 2 when you see 1 rep max clean and some heavy doubles, like nope.
I also
don't ask why you don't
like
PR.
the fact that we're doing more than like doubles or triples, asking for 1 more, maybe even 2 more clean and jerks. Because the idea here is when you allow someone to do singles or doubles, they're going to get the camera out, set up Instagram, get those videos out there. And instead of really focusing on what the intent is, which is learning to move around that barbell, you're just loading it up for the gram. So as much as I would hate to do...
Fatigue can be a hell of a teacher.
6x4 I would hate to do. I'm like, go up in the gym and be like, all right, I got like 6 hours to get through these 6 sets, but it's going to be the best way to understand how to go from standing up a heavy barbell, rebracing, and then moving around that barbell properly rather than just going ahead and heaving the heaviest weight and then praying that you catch it. Like the fatigue, like you said, we do complexes, we do big sets like this because our sport requires us to be able to do multiple reps under fatigue quickly and move well and be repeatable every single time. So 6x4, I can't think of a better way to get better clean and jerk. Gross.
Good luck, ladies and gents. All right, moving on. We are back to mandatory shoulder to overhead work. We went all in on phase 1 with that strict press and bench press. We had the non-mandatory push press, which not surprisingly saw a lot of people doing on Instagram. I love it. It's a great movement, but we're back to a movement that actually shows up fairly regularly in our sport, and that is what we're calling the touch and go push jerk. A lot of times you're doing whatever, a 5x5 with a training partner, and one of you is doing the touch and go style where you're essentially catching in the dip and going right back overhead, whereas the other person's stopping and, rebracing, standing up. So what we're going to do here is we're going to call for a higher rep touch and go, just to make sure that, essentially the idea is, you overreach that concept of what would be in a Metcon. So if you're used to sets of 10 at whatever, 155, 165, we're going to want it at 185, 205, whatever it is. And you're going to move along through that. We're going to start, at something like a 10 rep and work all the way down to a double. And the idea is we're really going to get some practice at moving something heavier. We're going to get stronger. Skill's going to go up. We're going to feel a little bit more confident when we're throwing barbells overhead under fatigue. But we're always going to end with a heavier set. There's always going to be a double or a single at the end of your set. And that's the one where, we don't care quite as much about that, the whole concept of the touch and go. So we get that session, we get your, whatever it is, 10, 8, 6. We really want to sort of push the pace with that a little bit. Obviously there's nothing else surrounding it. There's no running, there's no rowing, there's no chest to bar. So you should be able to do that and still move properly. But then we are going to end with a really heavy lift to get sort of that adaptation, making sure that, got to lift heavy to get stronger.
Do it.
And that's your push jerk. Also, non-mandatory lift. This is something that we tested out. We had some athletes test out before this cycle, and I really like the concept. So fast forwarding ahead, I guess I'll do this first. Towards the end of the week, we're going to be doing very similar snatch skill work to what we did with the clean. We're going to start, up at the hip. We're going to work our way down towards the knee. We're going to work our way below the knee, and we are going to focus on cleaning up how we move within the actual squat snatch. And it's a very, very similar progression, so you guys will be used to it. And if you haven't heard me say this before, this is all about variables, controlling how many steps there are to this process. So it's like, you take a beginner out into the gym and you try to teach them chest to bar. Do you tell them every single step and every single nuance to it and say jump up? Probably not. So what we're trying to get that same concept across when it comes to the Olympic lifting before we have that peak, to make sure we say, okay, we're gonna fast forward you through this movement and get you to that point where you're already in a pretty good position, and then we're gonna start to build slowly. So we do that over the course of the 7 weeks, just like we did with the clean. But we have an extra non-mandatory complex in here to make sure that people sort of understand the idea behind how we want someone to move with a barbell, and then also, solidify some overhead positioning. So you're gonna have a drop snatch plus 2 pause overhead squats. Drop snatch, in its simplest form, is sort of like a snatch balance without any dip drive. And what this covers is learning how to cue yourself to get under the bar by moving your feet. It's weird to have the bar on your back and just be like, press under it. Like it's hard to conceptualize that without a dip drive. But it's such a great teacher that when your feet move, this kind of happens.
It's like teaching people to do the power position snatch without that extra hip hinge, without that extra little bit of drive.
Exactly.
You're only allowed to extend up. In this, you're only allowed to push under the bar.
Exactly. So we move the feet and that cues us, and that's just like the clean. That's just like the snatch. Arms bend, feet move, we pull under, both movements. But again, a lot of variables within that. I got to set up properly. I got to drive through my feet, but I get my knees out of the way, but they still need to be, pointing out, and I need to, transition back to the hip, get the knees in front of the bar. There's all these different things that make it challenging to really understand that concept. So we put the bar on the back, then we move the feet, and that cues us to get under. And we also get to start, as we start to add weight, understand this concept that more weight on the bar allows us to pull under faster. The drop snatch, it is pushing under, but it's very similar. It's a very similar concept. And I think people can wrap their minds around not being scared of heavier weight and getting under it by doing the drop snatch.
I think this is an optional piece that should be done for athletes as well. If you consider yourself, well, one, if just objectively that your power snatch and your squat snatch are too close together. They shouldn't be. They, you should be able to squat snatch
or you like
more.
literally power snatch, but coach is watching,
exactly,
so you ride it back down.
And the other
after.
thing is if your squat snatch looks more like a power snatch plus an overhead squat, you pull the bar high enough to power snatch it, but still, if you struggle with that, this is one of those drills that helps you be actively under the bar so that you get confident. Once you're pulling from the floor, you don't need to elevate the bar as high because you know how to get under it quickly.
We're also eliminating, like you said, eliminating some of the noise, the extra movement that can occur in a snatch, and allowing an athlete to really reinforce good positions, because so many people desire to have that really nice, sexy 1 rep max snatch, and they go to competition and they have to do a ladder, and it's like do multiple, and maybe they survive the first half of it, but when the bar gets heavy because their movement's not repeatable or their technique's not dialed in, they fall apart and wonder why. Hey, my 1 rep max is great, but I can't do it at 80% for high reps. This gives you the opportunity to really focus on something that is an integral part of the movement, which Drew said was pushing under the bar, stabilizing, and really reinforcing positions. Like, one of my favorite drills to do with an athlete who's struggling with their snatch is to say, every time you catch the barbell, hang out in the bottom for 5 seconds, because it'll tell you a lot about your bar path, what your foot movement was, what you did with your hips, where the bar goes through your pull. It's a really good accessory movement, but this is a very similar idea where you're putting yourself in a position where, maybe early on you're going very, very light, but you're reinforcing what it should feel like when you catch your snatch. And then when you go to do the work on Saturday, you have your notes from Tuesday to compare to and say, do I feel the exact same way I felt on Tuesday now here on Saturday? Because if you're not, that's, news for you. That's a chance for you to reflect on what is different about doing a drop snatch versus your squat snatch, other than the fact you're doing a slightly different movement, but they should feel very similar.
Absolutely. And the 2 pause overhead squats, that's just solidifying positioning.
Bonus.
Yep. We're just trying to make sure that when we're down in that position, that we're comfortable and we know where we want to be. Same concept as pausing in the bottom with your snatch. If you go down there and you don't feel comfortable, feel like you either need to stand up or drop the bar, probably not going to be able to land those 1 rep maxes, even though you've gotten yourself
my
stronger.
favorite parts about camp, when you have people grab the barbell and you say, all right, everyone put the bar in the front rack or put the bar over your head, go to the bottom of your squat, and like 4 seconds in, everyone's crying and moaning and groaning and like in these terrible positions. You're like, how much weight could you clean or snatch in that position? Everyone's like fucking 0. And you're like, well, then fix it. Like, if you're one of the reasons why, like, you really want to have one of these good lifts, you want a good clean, good snatch, but you're not willing to put the time in with an empty bar or just the, uncomfortable positions that you reflect upon back when you were a beginner in a beginner's class, like when they made you hold the deadlift position forever, it's because they want you to reinforce what it feels like. This is essentially the exact same thing. We want you to feel what it feels like to be in the bottom of a good, solid snatch.
Right. So the big money lift of phase 1 was the deadlift. We did the deadlift, and then in phase 2, as we explained last time, a lot of more traditional kind of quick pulling from the floor with the power snatch, with the power clean. And Hunter and I also snuck some pretty heavy or high rep deadlifts into the programming to be like, hey, it's great that you got your PR, but what did it do for you? Like where are we going? We're back to mandatory deadlifting, and this time we are going to be doing a deficit deadlift. For anybody that hasn't done these before, you stand on a competition plate or stack up a couple of high temps. We have it listed as a 3-inch deficit deadlift. Typically, I have people do them on like the 55-pound comp plates. That's 2.5, 2 3/4, something like that. That's perfectly fine. We also have a little video for you guys to show you, how we think you should be moving through this. And in that video, we say, if you're not in a good position at 3 inches, knock it down to 2, knock it down to 1. Make it about like you and what you're trying to progress on, and not just like blindly follow sort of what's written there. The idea behind the deficit deadlift is forcing leg drive in the first pull. And when you force leg drive in the first pull, you can understand that the freaking movement is done when it's at your knee. So many people use their erectors to get up to the knee, and then who knows what's going to happen after. Like I always joke about it, the like whatever 60-second deadlift from the CrossFit Total video back in the day with this like that's always sort of how I feel, because it's like you have created this like double lever system, and literally all you have to do is push your butt forward if you're out over the bar, and you're done. Like, you're good to go.
Yep.
But what this does is it forces a first pull. I also love that you two have to do this, because in the CrossFit setting, you guys don't have a ton of a first pull. You drive through your legs well, but your hips stays so high that it probably won't translate when you want to go pull a 1 rep max.
This is exactly why I use the hex bar in phase 1, because you and I talked about
Same
this
concept.
being an athlete who's typically a good puller, but not necessarily at a comparable squatter. You said, hey, why don't we try the hex bar for a phase and see how that affects your deadlift? And I haven't tested a 1 rep max since, but the hex bar increased my comfort with it. And I do realize that like working in some of these positions that are a little bit less than comfortable or unfamiliar are one of the best ways to essentially bulletproof the rest of your movements. And the crossover between the skill adaptation that occurs in a funky movement like a deficit deadlift or a deficit handstand pushup does carry over to then your traditional, more commonplace CrossFit movements. So really focusing on that leg drive will essentially translate to then being able to pull a heavier clean off the ground, be able to back squat more. All these things that translate by increasing that range of motion gives the opportunity to play with something new, but it also gives you insight into like, all right, am I deficient in this one part? And I guarantee that when you and I go out there to go do our deficit deadlifts, we might have a wake up call and be like, all right, I thought I was a good deadlifter, but the bar says just otherwise.
And just developing strength is so angle and leverage based. It's why we don't say like, yeah, go ahead and low bar back squat instead of high bar. Like there's plenty of value in it, but it doesn't translate as well to our lifts. And the deficit deadlift is kind of nice because you get that increased range of motion, but after those first 3 inches, it should look like a normal deadlift. You just have that initial like additional leg drive off the floor. So
yeah, and that, for people who don't love the deadlifting, that's going to translate everywhere. For guys like you that love to deadlift, that's going to show up more in your 1 rep max ability. Or, I'm gassed and the bar is pretty damn heavy. Right. The person that comes to mind almost immediately is Cody. Cody used to be terrible at deadlifting, like 1 rep max for reps, all that stuff. Really struggled with it. And then when the concept of like trying to push your feet through the floor and not pick the bar up with, your hands and your back, like when that clicked for him, he became the person that came in second in the world in the deadlift workout in the open this year, something like that. So we're talking about someone who would have come in 1,000th to second based on, this concept. Yes, he's a bigger guy. He should have the mechanics for it, but it really didn't make sense to him. So we are trying to force this to like make sense to you. And the percentages are a little bit lower, but we know that if we move a barbell a little faster, that's going to help us. And we also know that a lower percentage, but a higher rep count, if we've got a 10x3, we're getting that same kind of adaptation. We just have to force ourselves to go through 10 sets.
Another thing I'd suggest too. Sorry, Drew, didn't interrupt. But another thing to add to that deadlift, like you said, speed off the floor. If you're worried about it being too light and you're not getting enough from it, go slow to the floor. One of my favorite ways to help an athlete really understand positions and to get stronger is that time under tension. Now you're fast on the way up, so you're really hammering that like expression of force, but then take your time on the way back to the floor, relearn these positions and see what it feels like. And if you control that, what we call like library deadlifts that we've talked in the past. If you do that on the way to the floor, you're going to be thankful that it's only 60 to 70% and it's not 80 to 90. Like it's going to be a really good way to get strong without having to worry about having the bar bend over your body.
Yeah, it's a nice little anatomy lesson to like really feel like, oh, whoa, I have hamstrings? What the hell are those?
What are these?
I thought those only came out like when the sled or the assault runner made me do it.
Two notes. One, percentages are going to be based on your conventional deadlift from the floor because we're not testing a 1 rep max.
Please do not.
Deficit deadlift.
I thought you were Hunter.
Yeah, I did today, 135. So those are based off of that. And then, so we're doing 10 sets, which could take a long time, but it's at a lower percentage. What are you thinking as far as like resting goes? Like this isn't going to, at the percentage, it's not going to be insanely demanding on either your body or central nervous system.
I want people resting at least a minute and feel free to take that all the way up to your kind of standard strength, like 3-minute range.
Sure.
Like personalize this session. When we want something to be an EMOM or an every 3 minutes, every 4 minutes, like the competitor prep program, a lot of that is, we'll go there. But, because we're telling that story, we're continuing to connect the dots on all these different things. We are allowing you to personalize your session to then hopefully, throw it over to conditioning and have it actually, mean something.
Right.
Moving on, we get to skip over the squat, clean, and jerk because we've already talked about that. That is a squat, clean, and a split jerk for all 24 reps of your session. It's not a power clean to front squat. It's not a push jerk. It's not coaches watching, so I'll throw my feet out to the side a little bit in like a weird position. It is a full-on squat clean and split jerk. And then, we already referenced on Saturday, we're doing the, power position to low hang to below the knee snatch work, and a new spin on an old friend. We are going to be moving the back squat, your brand new bolstered back squat, from doing 5s and 4s and 3s and probably what felt like every single day for 7 weeks. We're going to use that to do some serious reps when it comes to the back squat. So the way that it's listed out is essentially as many reps as possible at 70%. Take it out of the rack, turn the music on, have someone slap you in the face or don't, and squat it as many times as you possibly can. As many times as you should. Like, this range will be very different for different athletes. A power athlete's going to fizzle out a little bit sooner. That probably means that you should
70%.
That probably means that you should be doing it anyways. And then a more, endurance-based athlete is probably going to get more reps. And that's a good thing because you need to overreach to get better at something that you're already good at. So I'm perfectly fine with both of those things. And essentially the way that it goes, you get to retest it and then retest it and then retest it. And then we turn the percentage up just a tiny bit, retest it. And then finally at the very end, you have a pretty decent weight that you get to finish with. Not to confuse anyone, but we have some sort of warm-up suggestions in here, just to make sure that you are, I feel like a lot of people are going to want to go in and just get to 70% pretty quickly.
Yeah, it doesn't take too long to get there and just rip out your set. But
exactly. So we have some sort of odd warm-up stuff that we know that works pretty well. So we have, for example, 8 tempo pause squats at 35%. So you're really letting your musculature know and, increasing blood flow and doing all this stuff, like a lot of time under tension through the correct positions to sort of know how you feel. And then we move from that to 6 tempo down, fast up. So essentially same concept on the way down, really loading properly, really feeling out how everything's going that day. So you can mix in, your personal mobility or whatever, but then standing up fast to be like, okay, I'm about to do something that requires some, aggression.
I would definitely recommend you guys hit those sets. I remember doing these when we first tested out the die-set squats and doing these type of thing where you're just going for a big old set. And if you do not warm up well, you will cut yourself short by, I'd say, somewhere between 3 and 10 reps, depending on the athlete you are. Let yourself get warm, work on good positions, because to do this just to do this for bragging rights, hey, I did 325 for 13 reps. Great. Did you do them well is what matters. So use that warm up and use that skill. I mean, I'm sure we'll probably do a video on how to properly execute this session, but it's going to be really helpful to you to understand that the warm up is intended to help you succeed at this piece and not just a throwaway.
Yeah. I mean, it's, again, we harp on it all the time, but you have some Metcons are 60 minutes and it's not hard. We haven't gotten there yet. It's not hard
coming.
It's not hard to put in a lot of effort over the course of 60 minutes, but condensing that much effort into one set of back squats is a challenge. And it's going to be way more challenging if you don't warm up properly. If you don't, we do the sweat check here, oh yeah, you're definitely ready for that. You're fucking bone dry and half asleep. Good luck with that.
Perfect. Better put 70% on and sit down and stand up.
Good luck with that. So that's the strength work. The accessory work is going to continue to be very similar to what it's been in the past. The sort of retest model that we used was much more variance in phase 1 and then a little bit more of the repeated structure in phase 2. And we got some really good feedback on people feeling like they wanted to go, back to the banded pull-ups, back to the glute ham raise. Okay, I did 10s last time, let's do 12s this time, or 15s this time. So there still is enough variance over the course of a 2 or 3 week stretch, but then you're going to repeat stuff and we're going to ask for some, some higher rep counts. As always, completely optional. None of the accessory work is mandatory, which means you can do 0 of them, 1 of them, 2 of them, all 3 of them. They can take place of another conditioning piece or another, non-mandatory piece, whatever it is. This is supposed to be figure out what your training day is and then address, your accessory work and whether that's actually going to work for you or not. And it is not a strength session. We've got some dumbbell bench in there. We've got even some traditional bench press in there.
It's just how you stay healthy from beginning to end of the
Move
phase.
through range of motion, add a little bit of weight in there to teach yourself, I can figure out how to use, my pecs versus my triceps or my shoulders when it comes to bench pressing, whatever it is. So yeah, that's the strength work. That's a little note on the accessory work. Again, we are trying to connect the dots from all of these different things. And one of the best ways to continue to connect the dots is to do conditioning.
So, just to kind of tie in again, phase 2 into phase 3 a little bit, we're kind of in that mode of trying to connect things we did before and then reintroduce them into conditioning portions, and also give you the chance to retest them using the skill work. So this phase, the skill work, I'm going to kind of work from skill work to conditioning. Skill work, we're focusing a little bit more on what we're calling bar pull. So pull-ups, bar muscle-ups, anything that you do on a bar that is a pulling movement, even some rope climbs and stuff like that, general pulling, as well as handstand walking. So the skill work, a lot of low intensity, moderate.
That's a heavy hitter combo right there. Like those two skills can make or break
your
someone's career, even if they're strong and fit and all that good stuff.
Someone's open, like anything like that. So we'll give you that opportunity in the skill work. And then if you remember last phase, our kind of retest, that forest pump where we tested toes to bar, handstand push-up capacity, and the skill work was largely kind of EMOM based, a little bit more structured in that sense. This time, the skill work with when we do have toes to bar or handstand push-ups, instead of kind of timing it or kind of mandating the volume through an EMOM, we're going to say, hey, AMRAP, for example, let me find a piece here. 15 rounds, 6 unbroken handstand push-ups, strict handstand push-ups or handstand push-ups. So we're letting you kind of rifle through those now that you've developed that skill with kind of the mandated rest. You can now rip through those as fast as you can, and similar pieces will show up with the toes to bar. But as far as the skill, kind of the step 1 of the skill work for this phase, like I said, bar pulling and handstand walk work. And then in the conditioning, the way that we're going to test that is by putting bar pulling and handstand walking in a conditioning piece.
And then a nice barbell that will assuredly fuck up both of those movements on purpose.
Very, very fun looking piece. Lord of the Stings. You'll see that on Wednesday. We'll leave it at that. It'll include the things that we just talked about and a delightful barbell movement at a delightful weight. That
sounds delightful.
Yes, it will be delightful, if you will.
The hint is that the barbell is very thematic with phase 3.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So again, we're trying to give you that opportunity in the skill work or the opportunity in the Metcon or in the test pieces to say, oh, wow, this is where I can get better at it. Let me figure it out in the skill work, come back 7 weeks later, put what you learned back into that retest and crush it. We're giving you the answers to the test because we want you to improve on it. The interval test for this phase, I love the name. I'm so glad we changed it from my stupid idea to this better idea. Thrusters and step overs. We'll leave it at that. You'll see it when it pops up, but it is a descending rep scheme, and the theme there is just like when we have an interval, 1, it's descending reps, 2, there's built-in rest. That can only mean one thing. We need you to set your hair on fire and race to the water bucket.
Be fucking gritty
when you're done. So
I mean, and it's very doable in the doses. So that's just another step up.
It is.
There should be 0 questions about what you're trying to do in this piece.
Yeah, we've asked for say it starts with 40 thrusters. We've asked for. I'll just say that. I like throwing that out there. I don't like just alluding to it without giving people a little bit of context. Starts with 40 thrusters. I won't say the weight, the rep, or anything else, but
is that 225? Sorry, just kidding.
40 squat clean thrusters, 275.
No. It's actually just air Fran.
PVC pipe. Oh my god.
No pipe.
Just hands.
Yeah, just
hands. Not so bad. We've asked for sets like that in the past. You guys will look at that
or what you're talking about.
We've asked for sets like this in the past, and it's becoming more and more commonplace that you need to be willing and able to hold on to a whatever implement we decide to make you do. For that extended set, really try to hold on, recognize that there's that rest coming up. The reps get smaller, which means you need to dig deep and hold on. That's really it. And like with any interval, there's an equal part of a capacity test as well as a recovery element to it. The fasted cardio, we've talked so much about how important it is to go long, whether it's in the bitch work or the fasted cardio itself, but you need to build up that ability to recover when you are resting, whether it's mandated by the interval or mandated by your fitness. You have to be able to recover quickly so you can get moving again. Yeah, I think that wraps up kind of the conditioning.
I think that it's important, even though it's every single phase and it's what we're always doing.
The variance.
Just to talk about the fact that like the visual you can create is, I don't know, like someone creating a blanket, and you've got like this, all the strings hanging, and we have these opportunities, 6 or 7 different categories. And if you broke those out into subcategories with movements, obviously way more, but we have all of these things, and it's it's thoughtful randomness, right? So we want variance, but we're in a sport, so we have to make sure that we check off all of these boxes continuously. Sure. So you take, your time domains and your style of workout and your movements, how it's going to feel, and we weave those things together every single week back and forth to, while it's, in progress, it probably doesn't look like a whole bunch, but then you get to the bottom and it's, oh wow, nice tapestry, Drew.
Yeah. Or at the very least, I have some reference point for like, oh, I'm doing a qualifier workout. I've done either something exactly like this or similar enough that I know how it's going to feel, and you have that context to go off of.
Yeah. So that happens phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and during the open. But it's important to understand that we are always doing that, and there is like a very thoughtful mode behind it. So we do need to stay true to our sport and, what created this, amazing strength and conditioning program, but we check off every single box every single time that we do it. And that's how, we get our athletes from point A to point B.
So yeah, you good?
I'm good.
I'm good. All right. So going on to the bitch work for the phase. Up to this point, you've primarily seen us do things separated out. We typically ask you to sit on a machine, whether it's a rower, a ski erg, or a bike, extended period of times. We go short, we go middle, we go long. And over the course of the last, 14 weeks or so, you've gained a lot of information about yourself on pacing, how these movements feel, damper settings, cadences. All this information is great. But what our sport often asks us to do is to say, how does one affect the other? Great example of it would be that run, swim, run from the games a couple years ago. You had to run at a very aggressive pace, stay up with the pack, swim proficiently, and then run hard at the end. Or acid bath over in Dubai, where they had to do ski, row, bike, like just go as hard as they could through something very, very short. Our sport's asking us to know how you can transition from one to the next and from one to the next and how they affect one another. So for the phase, we are breaking out some mixed modality monostructural movements. Essentially, we're going to look for you guys to spend most of your longer duration aerobic training on mixed machines. We have a really fun in air quotes, test for this at the beginning of the phase.
I'd love to hang out with you on a Friday night.
No, for real. I tested this a couple weeks ago, and Hunter sort of alluded to it earlier. He didn't really even let the cat out of the bag, but he joked about a 60-minute workout.
That's not even the one that I was talking about.
We have more than one for you.
People are going to hate retest days 1 and 2 so goddamn much. We're going to lose everybody. Misfit Athletics is canceled.
But the point being, we've now seen how important it is to be able to go into that longer time domain. Like, no longer is it, at regionals and you have to go sub 20 minutes on all your events. You've got to be able to be comfortable going long durations on things. So I won't tell exactly how long it is, but Hunter sort of alluded to around the hour mark. You've at this point probably done a couple pieces like that. You get some more coming, and I'm really excited for you guys to see what it feels like to do this, upcoming long mixed modality aerobic test. In addition to that, you'll also have your fasted cardio. This phase, we're going away from, phase 1 was the C2 bike, then we had the skier. Now we're going to do a mixed machine. It's going to be very straightforward. It's going to be a linear progression where each week you'll add a minute to each machine. And over the course of the phase, you'll see how your pacing is affected as the duration increases. But hopefully you guys can use this information to say, all right, when I go back to the retest week during the end of the phase, how much that information then carries over to what am I going to be able to do when I retest this? Because a lot of what that test is for the aerobic test in the original part of the phase is about what your paces are going to be, and it's going to teach you a lot about that.
Yeah, and for anyone that's new to Misfit Athletics, we program 7 days a week, and especially that day 4 of the week with the fasted cardio, that's a training day. I mean, a lot of times we've categorized that as an active rest day, but we don't want like you still want to go and see what it is, log into the app, go to misfitathletics.com. You know, your day 4 each week has something in there that is not a throwaway at all. Like, we expect people that are trying to make it to sanctionals in the CrossFit Games to be training on that day. And although much different effect on your central nervous system with this fasted cardio stuff, we're asking for it to be done, and to be done, you know, with meaning.
Yeah, I mean, don't use it as a throwaway. You have this information at the end of your training piece, the end of your fasted cardio day. You'll have effectively 3 splits. You'll know what your average 500 meter pace was, how many meters you did. All that information is good going forward, so that when you get back to, you know, another time you have a piece like this or something similar, you can recall that information and go, all right, this is what I can do when the time domain's X minutes versus, you know, a different X minute. Like, you're able to see those comparisons and figure out what that gear needs to be so that you're able to stay moving. And, you know, hopefully you guys have found that a lot of this aerobic training is teaching you more about your body outside the confines of like a 20-minute AMRAP, which is for a lot of CrossFitters, their long workout. You know, obviously we're seeing the sport is progressing. You need to be comfortable with those longer durations. So, you know, enjoy the mixed modality, long aerobic pieces. In addition to the aerobic focus, we also have an anaerobic focus this cycle, or this phase, excuse me, that is running. We want to get you guys comfortable running at a very, very uncomfortable pace, which I know sounds, you know, oxymoronic here, but we want you guys to understand that in addition to being able to run long, you need to be able to run at a very uncomfortable pace and be able to repeat it a few times, because like we said early on, you might have to do a run, swim, and then run again. You got to know what it feels like on your second and third interval and what you're capable of, because that'll dictate how you know, essentially progress in the sport and how you can then use that information to move on to something else right afterwards. So the test piece for this phase is called Pre. I don't know if you guys out there know Steve Prefontaine, but he was a Oregon track runner and I'm going to share. Yeah, Olympian. I'm going to share a little of just, you know, one of his days during his training season. So let you guys, you know, ruminate this on this for a second, but his Saturday during season training looks something like this. AM, 3x1 mile run at a pace of 4:24 mile, followed by a 4:22 mile, followed by a 4:16 mile. And in between each one of those miles, he jogged, I don't even know what that pace was, probably a 5-minute mile, 800 meters for recovery. Now, for a lot of us...
so he did negative 1 mile splits starting at a 4:26 mile?
Yes. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, you want to do the math on that? Crunch those math on what that 400 is?
No.
At the Olympics, he ran I believe it was a 4:04 in the final mile of the 5K.
Didn't even go... I was going to say, didn't even go sub 4 in his mile.
What a bitch.
What a pussy.
So, but that was not done.
5K.
That's like his buy-in. That's the start of his training day. That's not it. He follows that up by 18 by 300 meter run. So 18 300s. The first 6 at a 52 second pace, followed by 6 at 48 seconds, followed by 6 at 46 seconds. And that's just his morning session. His evening session was followed up by like, you know, a 15-mile run at a 5:30 mile.
There was one when we were looking up this stuff where he would essentially alternate pacing on 200s for 3 miles straight. And he would run a 30-second 200 followed by a 40-second 200 and switch back and forth. So he'd run 110s for 3 miles.
Good gravy.
110 400s for 3 miles straight.
Can you imagine, like... I
don't even know what's coming next.
Here's what you do. You just set up a straightaway, let Steve go, get into his pace, and every 400 meters have someone new who's fresh. Basically just attempt to PR their 400, keep up with him for 110, and then they fall off and the next guy goes. And he's just like, you fucking idiot.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, this is why this workout's called that.
Yeah.
And
to be fair, he's an Olympian, like, got it.
But he got there through this whole thing that we teach.
I was just going to say,
intensity of like, this is just what he did.
His mindset was something that hung up on our gym's wall for a long ass time. And essentially it's like the only pace is a suicide pace and today's a good day to die. Like that is what our training is about. Like if you're not excited about going in and just seeing what you're made of every single day, like you might want to reevaluate what you're into, because his outlook on training and his outlook on how I should approach things is, I mean, feels like it's right up the Misfit alley in terms of what we want to see you guys do when you attack a piece. How can you put yourself, throw caution to the wind and say, what can I gain from this? And, am I willing to put myself in a position? I mean, another story as I was reading his training was talking about how he got beat on some guy jumped in randomly in one of his 3-mile repeats and beat him by like 1 second. So he said, fuck you, I'm going to go run another one. He made the guy run another one with him and he knocked like 10 seconds off his like 4:08 mile or something ridiculous.
He did not lose at Oregon. No. He ran different events and he was there for 4 years and he never lost. No. He lost like 2 training sessions and was devastated.
Yeah, that story was crazy. He's like, I was so upset about it. I'm like, nope, you're not leaving. We're running another mile right this fucking second. Get over here, back to the starting line. So, we were working a little bit of aerobic, mixed machine. Anaerobic's going to be running. You're going to see 3 days a week of mandatory bitch work and 2 days a week of non-mandatory. And again, those 2 days, they really have some really unique focuses. Some of it's going to be more of that like CrossFit style bitch work like we've been doing the previous 2 phases where, if you're not good at wall balls, double unders, burpee box jumps, things like that, you get a chance to see how they are affected by, high heart rate and short, fast intervals over and over again. And then some of it's going to be a little bit of mixing around different time domains with some of the other movements that, a lot of athletes can focus on very specific needs in their own fitness. Are you struggling as a runner? Are you struggling as a rower? Are you struggling as a skier? Gives you an opportunity to kind of test those things and improve those.
I think it's worth it. We don't like to do this within the podcast, but I think it's worth it to explain how pre is supposed to be executed so that it's actually done right. So essentially, you are going to run at a 1:30 for men, 1:45 for women pace, or faster for as long as you can. Right. That's the idea. It's not like, so we throw out the checkpoints for everyone so that there can actually be a score to this.
Yep.
So you're going to check on yourself every 400 meters. You're going to be like, okay, am I still averaging either a 1:30, 1:40 or 1:45 or faster?
We're hoping you guys have like sorry to interrupt, like a loop, a pretty solid 400 meter loop, track. And either your gym timer's sitting outside, you could pass by and be like, okay, I'm still good, or you've got to watch something like that.
If you're by yourself, one of the good situations would be one of the apps on your phone or your watch that you can, map my run and stuff like that. You can set intervals and it'll tell you in your ear and your headphones how fast you're actually running. But the idea is to go out and do that. Your actual score will be how many 400s you made it, but we are asking people to run their last 400 no matter what. I know that that's really challenging, but for test and retest purposes, that is going to give you so much more information than being like, oh man, I sprinted to the finish, there's no chance. You want to know what that means for you. What does that no chance mean? If you're after a 6-minute mile and you only make it to 1,200 meters, you're really going to want to know how long it did take you to run that mile. And, Hunter and I have been arguing about how far people are going to make it here. Hunter thinks people are going to run for over 2 miles.
No, I said we will get some people who can run a 12-minute 2 mile.
Okay.
Fair. I think it'll be small. It won't be a lot, but I think we will have some people who can do that.
I mean, if we tell Gabe right now he couldn't do that, he'll come here, hernia hanging out of his stomach.
Gabe doesn't count. He doesn't
care.
Yeah, Gabe just ran here. He's like, I just ran here in 8 minutes.
6 miles.
20 miles away. Yeah. So again, we don't normally do that, but it's as simple as it gets. For anybody that doesn't know, that's a 6-minute or a 7-minute mile pace. How long can you run it for?
Yeah.
hopefully at least a mile. That's sort of the like rough area we want people to end up in. Yeah, games athletes can.
I think a 6-minute mile is very reasonable for a
games athletes can run repeats at high 550 sort of in that range. So really cool test. Obviously extremely painful. Obviously more of an endurance athlete. You're gonna try to stay in the 120s. Someone like me, I better be close to 1 on the first one, and then you know what I mean. Like you're gonna have to know what type of athlete you are, and you're gonna have to know what this pacing feels like to execute.
I think
properly.
It's somewhere between kind of that row or die and the hell you ride.
Yeah.
And in the ski erg piece, like obviously you're probably not gonna sprint out of the gate like in row or die, but you're certainly not doing negative splits to keep going. Yeah, I don't imagine.
Very thankful you guys didn't make me test this the way I test row or die, where you just said keep running and keep running until you've run.
Doing great.
Thank goodness I didn't have to do this one.
Yeah, the downside about running is we know it's too.
And for anyone that's, in certain weather conditions or whatever, we don't want this done on a runner. Plain and simple.
No.
We want you carrying your body weight, I would say outside, but technically it could be on a track if you wanted it to, if you've got an indoor track, but we want this executed outside. So if the weather's not great and you got to move it a day, we would prefer that over, the stimulus on the machine is much different. Changes things quite a bit. So get outside for that. Last but not least, we just got to cover skill in swimming. The skill work is, if you've been following phase 1 and phase 2, skill work stays fairly similar. We obviously already talked about the bias is going to be handstand walk and then pull up, chest to bar, bar muscle up. But we're going to keep going through ring muscle ups and handstand push-ups and, awkward dumbbell movements, awkward kettlebell movements, legless rope climbs,
toes to bar,
all these different things. We want to extract them out just like we would the strength, just like we've extracted out the machines. We're pulling all of this apart every once in a while just to make sure that we are executing things the way we want to before we throw them back in. Skill sessions can mean different things to different athletes. You go into a skill session of a movement you love, push it a little bit, find out what you got going on. Go into one that's, super challenging for you, personalize it for yourself. The rep counts that we give you don't work for you, don't use them.
Correct.
Like
gymnastics is so tough too. Just absolutely. So individual dependent. You have to be willing.
Are you a pusher? Are you a puller? Are you big? Are you small? So many variables go into it.
Long arms, short arms.
Right.
Sensitive topic.
No, I just think about the kettlebell and the dumbbell stuff. And for us, that was like a really, important thing to include in the phase because we still to this day will cruise social media and we'll see people doing what looks like some bastardized kettlebell snatch. We're like, imagine if this person
My favorite's the rack position with the hands through the handles about 6 inches above your shoulders.
I think it's just because Rich did it that one time with thrusters on the beach and
sitting on that.
God, he looked good.
Just go watch Bronislav do do serious work in that workout that otherwise he probably, no offense, wouldn't have won if it was barbell thrusters. Go back to the games, watch that. Oh, okay, I should probably move kettlebell the way that kettlebell masters move kettlebells.
And please, for the love of God, if it says kettlebell snatch or kettlebell clean, it is from the hang. That's like the traditional naming convention for kettlebell work. You do not go to the floor with the kettlebells every time.
Send all kettlebell questions to Hunter at misfitathletics.com.
Literally.
Hunter at misfitathletics.com.
Fastest way for me to shoot myself in the head is to ask me a kettlebell question about the hang or the floor.
All right, we're not supposed to talk about kettlebells in front of Hunter anymore.
Trigger.
We'll move on to the swimming. We are on swim progression number 3. That starts with a 20-minute max distance swim and is retested as a 20-minute max distance swim. Do not do this progression without doing the first 2. So we'll always make sure that we post both the one that we're actually having now and then the previous ones. So if you want to start back down, if you're new to Misfit Athletics, you're finally taking the plunge.
LOL.
You like that?
I get it.
Swim for 10 minutes first, then 15 minutes, then 20 minutes. So you're going to go through that swim progression. That's on Sundays. We love swimming as active recovery, full body, not too brutal on your CNS, the movements themselves, you're floating. So, it's a little bit easier on your joints. It's a really good way to get a little bit of training in and recover. So that's going to be listed out as your Sunday every week. So you've got on Thursdays, you've got your fasted cardio, and on Sunday, you've got your swimming progression.
Yep. And included a little bit of a warm up this time. We didn't have that before, just super basic, but definitely don't just treat that 20-minute or whatever day you're on as just, I'm going to jump into the pool and use the first couple rounds as a warm up. You need to, one of the best things someone who swam taught me, who I'm not a swimmer, is you need to, I guess, you need to open up your lungs a little bit before, just everybody knows what it feels like to do that first 50 meters in the pool and you're just like, I'm going to die.
It's like when you take off for a run and you haven't warmed up at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no different at all, but especially because there's that element of holding your breath, you need get a good warm up in. It's this one takes 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes. Do it, get your lungs open up, get your breathing, and then start your swim.
Yeah. And for anyone, I think a lot of times we do these podcasts and we assume that you went through a million cycles with us and you've been through phase 1 and phase 2. If you're new to Misfit Athletics, outside of competition prep, we try to make it so that you can personalize this skill work quite a bit. That's why it's 20 minutes and not swim X distance. And that's why every single swimming session is time-based. When you go to competition prep, when you go to games prep, you're going to see specific distances for a lot of people.
Right.
But within this, we want you in a pool trying to figure out how to breathe and reach freestyle in a test, and then in a bunch of different mixed intervals, and then retest. And it's as simple as it gets. We start at 10 minutes. We're working our way out towards an actual 30-minute swim, and we're going to continue to repeat that stuff, but make it personalized for you. It's as far as you can swim in 20 minutes. It's going to be a lot different than as far as a swimmer can swim in 20 minutes or a CrossFit swimmer can swim in 20 minutes. Yeah. Those are very different things. But what's awesome about this is if you can learn how to swim, like actually swim, just the skill of it, forget the speed, you are going to win. Yeah, you're going to be light years ahead of most CrossFitters. You see what happens, how terrified people are at Wadapalooza. It's happening right now or in the future. People don't love to jump in, and it's usually not a very long swim. And it's like, you had another year to do this. So there's my plea on Sundays. Please go swim.
I mean, I can speak to a little bit of experience with the swimming. I'm not a good swimmer at all, but tore the Achilles tendon, and I had to find another way of getting aerobic exercise in. So the pool was my friend. Like, learn to jump in the pool, get one of those like goofy boots that you put on your leg that vacuum seals to your leg so you can swim and not get your cast all wet. But early on, it was, can I swim to the other side of the pool? Then can I swim down and back? And then can I go down and back twice? And the same linear progression we have with everything else that we do. That can be your focus. Maybe the first 20-minute swim, you make it 4 minutes and you take a little break, and you do 4 more minutes, take a little break, and you eventually get through, and whatever, you swim 800 meters. But you teach yourself how to go from 4 lengths to 6 lengths to 12 lengths. Like, right. Before you know it, you're swimming the whole length of the pool. And a personal experience is go out there and just find a way to be comfortable. No different than starting a long run. You don't start with a 50-meter sprint. You start very slow and controlled, and, essentially not giving you permission to take it slow, but go a little bit slower than you think you should, because it's going to help you stay relaxed.
This might be the one place where you can really give someone permission to just figure out how to do it.
And Absolutely. If you've never tried to swim for like 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes at a time.
If you go thrash, you're going to be done.
Oh man, you are screwed. You have to go slower than you think you
Good luck training Monday.
Yeah.
Really quickly here, we got a few questions from Instagram. People asking, I think some of these were kind of already answered, but we'll go over them anyways just to make sure. Colton A. Trip asks, how often will we squat and for how many reps? That's kind of a tough question to answer, but I think you're asking about back squat. The back squat, you will be doing that max set once a week at 70, 75, or 80%. One set, as many reps as you can possibly get.
Yeah, great news. You get to choose how many reps you do.
Yeah, exactly. So you decide. But obviously a lot of front squatting when you're trying to peak your 1 rep max clean. So that's going to be in there quite a bit. Fergus Gregg asks, I have qualifier workouts for a comp. What's the best way to incorporate them? This is the easiest one to answer. Take something that looks similar in your training, throw it in the trash, slide that qualifier workout in, you're good to go. The only thing to consider, kind of moving past that is, what did that qualifier workout do to you? Do you need to cut your training day a little bit short? Should you not do anything before? That sort of stuff, you're going to figure out what works best for you. But anytime you have something that you want to test that's coming up, take what we have in there, get rid of it, or swap it out with another day, and throw that qualifier workout right in.
Go ahead.
So if you are already a purchaser of the Sanctionals Prep, or you're not a complete subscriber, this is another reason why you'd want to do that. You can see this entire picture all at once and say, all right, this is where this makes the most amount of sense. And hopefully that gives you enough insight to look at your overall week of training volume and saying, this, like you said, throw away the piece that is similar, but then also help you adjust your volume to make sure that you aren't like burning yourself up leading up to this competition.
Yeah, I answer the question a lot, and I tell people, like, you obviously want to keep training. You can't stop training through a qualifier, but an easy way to keep your training volume, quote unquote, high is the bitch work, the aerobic stuff, like sit on a machine for a long time. That's not going to do anything but help you recover from a piece that maybe you hit at a higher intensity than a normal training piece. So,
right. Got some questions here about when the complexes are going to be back. If you're sort of following the story that we have here, there's a pretty good chance that we're going to ask you to get better at the movement, peak it, and then put it into a more CrossFit-y type setting. So that's sort of where we're taking this story. felt buried by volume squats in phase 2 and upped my calories. Thoughts on nutrition in phase 3. I think nutrition is going to be pretty similar across most of the phases, but one of the big questions is exactly what he just addressed. That was Garage Gym Misfit. You need to make sure you're eating enough food. And it's I don't want to give very ultra specific nutrition advice. That is something that, I do sort of in a different mode, but make sure you're getting close to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight that you would like to be at, the body, your hopeful body weight. So that can help either make you lose weight or gain weight. And then, fat and carbs, those are your energy sources. You have to make sure that you're getting that. So just make sure that you're there. And then, maybe it isn't nutrition, maybe it's sleep, maybe it's
that's what I was
mobility
say
work, maybe it's overtraining, under recovering, whatever it is. So always just keep an eye on, what we like to call, the other 23 hours. What else are you doing in your life? Because you're not spending as much time, under fatigue as you actually think.
And evaluating whether or not squatting 3 days a week, we're not asking you to do it in phase 3, but is that right for you?
Right.
If we'll see, I guess you'll have retested by then or almost retested, but evaluate how it felt, how obviously it beat the crap out of you during the phase. Maybe next time it's like the hatchet when it's 2 days a week, which is still a pretty substantial amount of volume. 3 days a week at the intensity we asked for is not for everybody.
Right. Snatch phase 1 rep max or clean. We already addressed that. That's going to be the clean. Snatch is going to be the skill work. How can you incorporate more Olympic lifting successfully into the Misfit training? We built the website based on trying to figure out how someone could personalize it a little bit more for themselves. And that's where things like the weakness templates and getting the programming in advance come into play. The pro tier is going to allow you to see all of our weakness templates. Make sure that you are watching this.
Make sure you're watching this.
Make sure you're doing exactly what you're doing right now, listening to this. You'll know that we're already doing the skill work and the snatch and the peaking here. But if you need to add some extra stuff in, we have new weakness templates for that. But you really should be subscribed to Complete to see the full week in advance. The Complete tier, the main thing with the Complete tier is being able to get your programming in advance so that you can set the template for the weaknesses on the left and your programming on the right, and figure out how these things could actually work together. Because if you don't remember or don't realize that we're doing X the next day and you do it already, it's kind of
fact.
Yeah, not good.
I'm going to say repetition is the name of the game here. You're going to be able to see the whole week in advance, but we're not saying you can't take an extra warm-up set or an extra 3 warm-up sets if you need it. I remember,
or adjust percentages to make sure that you're getting what you need.
I just remember training days, a couple years ago where we would say hey, it's supposed to be 7x1, but I probably took 25 reps to get up to the first weight of my 7x1. And you guys have that permission. We give you guidelines for what we're looking for, but feel free to make them your own. We've been saying the entire podcast. If you think you need to focus on something and you're not ready to jump into your first set, don't do it yet. You have permission to take those extra sets and refine things. Or you do your first set and you're that doesn't feel like it's supposed to. Go back, warm up a little bit more. Or maybe you got to do some mobility, or maybe you need some positional work. I remember days in the gym where you'd see someone with an empty bar or 65 pounds on a normal size barbell, and they're just doing snatches from the hip or snatches from low hang, or just doing the first pull because they realized either before, during, or after their session there was something very, very glaring as a weakness, and that allows them to kind of refine those things. So be okay with adding extra volume if it's skill work, not extra. You don't need to do 45x1 snatch at 90%. You need to do lighter weight for lots more reps to get that repetition in. So if you're looking to make it as a skill piece, to get better at a certain part of the lift, do that. Wouldn't recommend extra volume, doing a weakness template, 3 weakness templates and a squat cycle and all our lifting.
Yeah.
Be smart about it, but be okay with adding a little bit of extra practice in your warm-ups.
Definitely. Last but not least, when does the cycle begin? Is the final question from Matt.Yek.
February 24th.
February 24th, we will have test week, followed by 4 weeks of dedicated training, 1 week that we call a primer week. It's not deloading, it's refocusing on, closer to that open or competition mindset. I need to really focus on these 3 things and do them incredibly well. Intensity over volume, And then obviously last but not least, we have our retest week where you will either retest specific pieces or retest something that we feel is very similar, but that, gives you a little bit more variance.
Yeah.
Cool. We
Phase
did
3.
Done.
Did it.
We did it. All right, ladies and gents, that was the Phase 3 podcast. Thank you to our show sponsors, PureSpectrumCBD.com. Use the code word Misfit. SharpenTheAxeCo.com. Use the code word Phase 3 for 15% off. If you are a subscriber to the website, or if you just go to the website and click on blog, you will find the weekly Misfit Musings every single Thursday. As always, like, subscribe, comment. I'm at Misfit Coach on Instagram. Slide into those DMs, and let's talk about training. We'll see you next time.
Peace.